Welcome to another edition of Brewed For Change, an initiative of Green Frontier Capital, a pioneering firm investing in innovative industries that are aligned with India's sustainable goals. I'm Sandiip Bhammer, the host of this episode and also the founder of Green Frontier Capital, and I'm delighted to have with us on this episode Mr. Rajat Gupta, a visionary businessman and an educationist. Rajat, thank you for being with us today. I'd love to talk to you about your views on policy, leadership, innovation, and the transition to a global sustainable economy. But before we do that, let's do a little bit of a deja vu. I know that you came out with a book. It was a sold-out book. A lot of people want to know about your journey from a small, young boy in Calcutta to becoming the global head of McKinsey. Run us through that transition.
Oh, well, how can I do it in 1 minute? Let me see.
Just some insights.
I think I was privileged to have wonderful education at the IIT. Before that, in modern school in Delhi. But IIT is a very special education, and it prepares you for many things in life. I've always said, even if you don't want to be an engineer, engineering is a great discipline to learn problem solving, to learn critical thinking, and so on. I always wanted to go into management when I did engineering. So I applied to different MBA programs, both in India and abroad. I was lucky enough to get accepted at Harvard. I did my 2-year program there. When I was graduating, almost no one would interview me other than consulting firms. So I was lucky enough again to get a job in McKinsey. I was a slow learner. I was very young. I didn't have any experience. So my path to partnership was slower than normal, etc. But I caught up quickly, and I had an opportunity to go to Scandinavia, where ran a really entrepreneurial office that went from a very small office to a very large office in a very short period of time. And there I learned a lot about entrepreneurship, about client development, and so on. Then I was given a challenge, which was to run a most mature office of McKinsey. McKinsey was started actually in Chicago. Mm-hmm. So it was the Chicago office I went back to, and it had not grown for 10 years. And I had an opportunity to try some new ideas to grow that office. And I was successful in that. My partners displayed a lot of trust in me and elected me managing partner. It's one of the very few institutions that is a pure democracy. You write whoever you want to be the head of it. So I've
always heard that you've been one of India's greatest exports. So in that regard,
thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. No, it's a great institution. It's a truly meritocratic institution. It's a truly democratic institution. It's a partnership in the true sense of the word. So I spent 37 years there, and I really enjoyed it.
That's fantastic. And how much did your time at McKinsey shape your views on global business and global business strategies?
Almost all of it. I'm a product of McKinsey. As I said, I've never worked anywhere else in my life. So my worldview comes out of the work I did there. I was also lucky to start in New York, then go to Europe for 6 years, and then come back to Chicago. So I traveled around within the McKinsey system quite a bit, had different careers within McKinsey. So I've almost about 7 different phases in my 37 years doing different things. So it's entirely shaped by McKinsey.
Fantastic. Obviously, you've had pivotal leadership roles, obviously, as the global head of McKinsey. You were also on the board of Goldman Sachs. You were also a board advisor to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and also a founding member of the Indian School of Business. These are some fantastic achievements. Would love to basically hear maybe about 30 seconds, if you can, on each of those positions and how they've played an important role in how you've approached the entire business area.
So I would say that, I've had a belief that business works with the permission of society. And ultimately, business has to be a force for good. Mm-hmm. So right from very beginning, early in my career, when I got leadership responsibilities, I always felt that I had to give back to society and got quite involved in many different things. One of them was public health. So I was quite instrumental in helping shape the public health policy of the Gates Foundation. Did the initial work, the strategy work for India on what their presence in India was. Soon thereafter, I actually became the chairman of the Global Fund for AIDS, Malaria, and Tuberculosis. This is the largest health fund in the world. We used to give out about $4 billion a year for mainly to defeat these three diseases, but also to strengthen health systems. Subsequent to that, I had the idea of starting the Public Health Foundation of India, which I did in early 2000s, which became, I would say, the most preeminent public health institution in the country. This is one area. As you indicated earlier, I was very much saying I'm in great debt to India, the education system here, and what can I give back? And McKinsey was the largest recruiter in most leading business schools in the world. So I thought, I know something about business schools. I used to be on the board of many of them. So I thought maybe I should start a world-class business school in India. And that's what happened. I got together a group of leading industrialists in the country and globally, and collaborated then initially with Kellogg and Wharton, and then with London School of Business also, in creating the Indian School of Business, which has now two campuses, one in Hyderabad and one in Mohali in Punjab. And we graduate 1,100 MBAs a year and many other programs that we run. We now have the largest alumni body of any business school in the country, bigger than IIM, Ahmedabad or Bangalore or Calcutta or any of them.
Excellent. Switching gears to a subject that's very close to our heart as Green Frontier Capital is the areas of sustainability and climate change. During all the time that you've spent as a business leader at McKinsey and in your various roles, did you ever incorporate any sustainability or encounter any sustainability-led challenges or opportunities, either when you spoke to the clients of McKinsey or when you made your own decisions?
Well, it has gradually gained in importance. It always was a significant part of strategy for now probably 2 decades at least. And it has gained in importance more and more every year. One very interesting change in debate has been, first, it used to be all about equitable equity, and the fact that the developing countries are not part of the big carbon footprint that already exists. And, so now the question was not of carbon emissions now, but
climate justice.
Justice and historical, etc. That debate, while it's a relevant debate, has shifted because now we have the possibility through technology to really forget about that debate and create a sustainable energy situation which does not give rise to many of these climate issues and sustainability issues that we see. You know it better than I do in terms of the upcoming technologies, whether it be in mobility or whether it be in
green
power
hydrogen.
generation, green hydrogen, you name it. All of those are ultimately fusion. If you change that paradigm, the technological paradigm, then you don't have to worry so much about the debate about who has the inventory of carbon up in the atmosphere.
Sure.
Although the issues about these technologies being available and the capital required to develop these technologies and where it'll come from, etc., is a relevant debate.
Yeah. Just your view. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of people who have dismissed the entire climate change issue. Do you think that the issue of climate change is a real one? Do you think it's overrated? Do you think it's a concept whose time is yet to come? What are your views on that?
No, I'm not a skeptic around. I mean, on the science. The science is there. It's very clear. But what I am more optimistic about now is that technologies are coming that will help us solve it. So that way, I've always been a optimist in terms of saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
Sure.
As necessity comes, we invent. We are very creative, human race as a whole. And I do believe that we'll be able to avert the kind of cataclysmic outcomes that one can imagine through technological change.
Yeah, sure. And you and me have discussed in the past that in order to really solve climate problems, there has to be innovation and fundamental innovation. However, we're actually seeing that most of the innovation that's actually taking place in India is price-led innovation, and the fundamental innovation is still taking place in the global north. Why do you think that's the case?
I think some of these require significant amount of investment. It requires, investment in basic science and physics and expensive labs and so on and so forth, and a lot of resources devoted to it. So we are, as you said, much better at application and getting that going, but the fundamental research, still we have quite a few ways to go. I was recently on a panel I was moderating, which had to do with the India-US
Council.
ICT.
Yeah.
And the areas that are defined there, many of them relate to climate change. And I'm hopeful that there will be more and more collaboration. You got to remember that India is already, or will be certainly in the future, the largest reservoir of technical talent in the world. So if we're going to really invest more, India has to be a big part of it. And therefore, I feel it'll come.
Sure. And what do you think, apart from climate change, just shifting gears to leadership, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges today facing leaders, globally speaking?
It's a very broad question. I mean, depends on what field you're talking about. In geopolitically, one clearly sees extraordinary divisions. I'm not particularly experienced in it, but I've never just feeling that the world is not in a good place in terms of the wars and the divisions that are evident today. I think we have also not solved the fundamental problems of inequity, although China in the last several decades and now India have brought from poverty a very large number of people out of poverty, which is wonderful news. And more that will happen. But the basic income disparities still exist and maybe even growing. So I'm worried about that. So in general, there are many issues to be solved, and it requires the kind of leadership is not that common.
Yeah.
So, you have to rise above parochial interests and look about the global interests. So I was interested when India took on the chairmanship of G20 and came up with Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That's a great description of humankind being able to be all in the same boat together and all having to survive in this fairly hostile environment.
Sure. As India grows, what role do you think management consultants will be able to play to guide Indian companies towards more sustainable development practices?
Well, I think it's the same as before, although management consulting has become much more of a commonplace thing than it used to be. When I joined management consulting in the early 70s, there were a few firms. They were small in number in terms of number of people that were there, etc. And we were invited in, especially McKinsey, which does primarily top management strategy and organizational consulting, to solve issues that were really of interest to top management. We then, over time, have clearly expanded the capabilities. One thing is that almost all consultants now have verticalized in the sense of industry specialization.
Yeah.
Also, technology now plays a much bigger role in consulting than it used to ever before. So it has become much more widespread. I think, why do companies use consultants? Many times because they don't have the capacity within themselves and that kind of talent. Many times because they want an objective third point of view. And honestly, many times because they think that's the way to, in a way, outsource some of the analytical work that needs to get done and no need to staff up to it. So, for a variety of reasons, consulting is sort of a golden age of consulting. Lots of work going on, and it'll probably continue.
Sure. And what advice would you give to Indian corporates who are sort of on the fence of incorporating climate-friendly, infrastructure or decision making, especially when they have to balance growth versus, sustainable practices? What advice would you give to companies?
Well, I think, the word sustainable themselves, right? I mean, very few institutions live for a very long period of time. So if you aspire to be an institution that survives decades and centuries, then you have to build in sustainable practices.
Sure.
That's one thing. Second thing is, you'll not be a really long-term successful unless you are helping society cope with the major issues that it has. So part of that is being a responsible citizen in terms of climate sustainability, etc. So if you don't subscribe to that, you're in the long term not going to be successful.
Sure.
There may be some short-term trade-offs, of course.
Yeah. And from your own global leadership experience, how much of a role do you think India can play in this entire fight against climate change?
Well, I mean, it has to play a very central role. I'm heartened by the leadership position India is taking in many of these areas and leading by example also. Take the example of renewables, being a major push in renewables. It has the advantage, as many in India say, we don't have this big legacy or installed base, so we can leapfrog technologies. We have done so in the digital arena. We can continue to do so in energy and in other areas. So I think India it's the largest country in the world now by population, so it has a central role.
Yep. And as the founder of the Indian School of Business and your role as an educationist, how much do you think education has a role in basically spreading the knowledge of sustainability?
Well, I mean, there are many different areas, right? I mean, we clearly need to invest in technical education. I'm a graduate of IIT. I'm very involved in the IIT system. It really needs to be very R&D oriented, new research oriented, etc. As being a founding member of ISB, I mean, we originally had the idea that we would make it an entrepreneurship hub, that entrepreneurship would be a core value of the school. And not only will we teach it, but that's what we will encourage. And lo and behold, it has come true. And we have created many entrepreneurs that have come out of the ISB system, very successful ones. And it's a very core value of the school. So I believe technology and entrepreneurship are two very strong pillars in the education system that should.
Excellent. And so your thoughts on the startup and technological ecosystem in India, what do you think of that? I know that you've been a mentor to many startups. You actively remain involved as an investor in them. What do you think is the future for our startup ecosystem?
Well, I think it's a very vibrant and vibrant ecosystem right now. I would make two observations. One is that much of it is got to do with e-commerce rather than fundamental technology, which is e-commerce. I don't want to denigrate it. It is needed. But at the same time, I think entrepreneurship in some more fundamental areas would be good. The second thing I would say is that valuations have gone completely berserk. And while we were proud of the fact that, 2 years ago or whenever we were creating a unicorn every day, and half of them are no longer unicorns. So we ought to not get ahead of the story. And the objective is not really to create unicorns. That's not the objective function. The objective function is to create sustainable long-term businesses that add real value to their customers.
Well said. Are there any emerging sectors that you particularly think are of great promise, especially emerging out of India or any of the other emerging markets?
There's innovation in everything. So I'm not going to say that one is particularly more than the other, but clearly climate-related, energy-related is one definite area. I also think biotech and by and large, life sciences is going to be a very important area to innovate around. But I don't want to, there's innovation everywhere.
Yep. A couple of more questions. What are your views on mentorship and its role in professional growth?
I grew up in a company which is entirely based on apprenticeship learning, mentorship, because it's all about people. We don't have any particular technology or plants or anything like that. So it all had to do with mentors that taught you, through their own experiences. So I very much believe in a team-oriented way of working. I believe in mentorship. I think it's your responsibility to mentor the younger generations. It can make a world of a difference. There are only few, probably Steve Jobs of the world, who can succeed with their individual brilliance without help from others.
Sir, I know that you've spent a lot of time working and it's probably time for you to put up your feet. You probably have already done that. But what's next for you from here and what are you most passionate about?
Well,
where does one find Mr. Rajat Gupta?
I don't know. I just turned 75 in our traditional Indian philosophy of 4 phases of life. I've gone through 3 of them: Brahmacharya, which is a learning phase, and then Grihastha, which is building your career and family, then Vanaprastha, which is giving back to society and some level of detachment, and then Sannyas, which is truly detaching yourself. So not that they are defined by 25-year phases, but you got to have your mindset shift like that. So right now I've sort of giving up most of my formal responsibilities, but mentoring younger people would still be high on my priority list. And of course, spending a lot of time with oneself, as well as I have 4 daughters and 7 grandchildren, so that takes up a fair amount of time.
Wonderful. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on Brewed for Change. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure to host you today.
Thank you, Sandeep.
Thanks so much.